Hey guys, Zangus, and today I'm going to give you a movie review of Interstellar. By the way, I just want to note out to my subscribers that if you find the quality a little bit different, that is because I'm not using my original camera. I'm actually using the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 and I actually did an unboxing of that. And if you go to the settings and the resolution, you'll actually notice that this video is uploaded in 4K. So this is actually my first 4K video. The reason I'm using the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 to video this review is because currently my original camera, the Nikon D5300, is actually out of action. So I'm using this instead, and this entire video is actually recorded on the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, so I'll also be using this for a video test as well. So Interstellar was hugely promoted, and I'm not surprised as it's actually a really high budget film at $165 million. And the reason it's a really high budget film is because it is directed by Christopher Nolan, and many of you may know that Christopher Nolan is actually a really big director. He's actually my personal favourite director, and if you know him, you'll know that he's done some really big and successful films like the Batman trilogy and also films like Inception. So of course, because it is a high budget film, they want to have good actors and also big successful actors, and they've definitely done this, as the two main actors in Interstellar have both won Oscars, and that is Matthew McConaughey and Anna Hathaway. Not only has it got those big actors, it's also got some other big actors as well. It's got Jessica Chastain from Zero Dark 30, and also it's got Matt Damon, and quite frankly that was really unexpected, and I had no idea that he was actually in this film. I never saw him in the trailer, and I think from watching the film they've actually done that for a reason. So Interstellar really is a blockbuster sci-fi, and I wasn't really too much excited about it because I didn't really see that it had much to say from the trailer. But from watching the film, I think they've done that for a reason as well, and I think they've done that because they didn't want to show too much from the trailer. So the story of Interstellar is actually based in the future, and it's not specific where it is actually in the future, but it's based on Earth and it's based on the humans, and basically humanity is sort of struggling because weather's getting a little bit more extreme, and that means that things like crops are dying more often. And that's of course resulting in struggling to result with the food. It shows that it's what humanity is really going to be like in a couple of years, and I really like it because it's also realistic as well, and it introduces other characters like Michael Caine. Now what I like is that everyone gives the message that humanity's sort of stuffed, but the thing is it's not related to a film like an apocalypse, and I really like that because it's not over-exaggerating. Instead it's actually based on a family, and this family is mainly based around this farmer called Cooper, and he has two kids. So this farmer is actually played by Matthew McConaughey, and of course he is the starting role for Interstellar, and I think he actually plays a really good farmer because he's got quite a certain accent, and I think that suits really well to his character. So his daughter Murph is really close to his dad, and straight away from the start of the film it is mainly based around the family life, and it really shows that there's a really strong connection between the daughter and father, and I really like that because it works amazingly well and it's incredibly convincing. So about 10 to 20 minutes in, random shit starts happening in the house, and basically they sort of don't really understand what's going on, and she actually believes that there's a ghost, and of course everyone's like, yeah, right, a ghost. And basically Matthew McConaughey's character is actually like, yeah, that's actually really weird. And basically it literally does lead them onto a journey because like dust starts falling down, and it sort of makes this message, and basically because it's a certain message it goes into binary, and binary is a certain type of code which is used for computers, and binary is either zeros or ones, and of course one is either on or off, and it can either be yes or no or stuff like that, and it can also be numbers as well, of course, and that gives them coordinates, and they basically go on this sort of mini adventure, and it leads them to this random NASA location. And I really like that because it's not like an actual just that, it literally is just a small adventure, and then they go there and then they realize that there's this whole NASA location based in this random farm. So basically when they get to this secret NASA location, basically Michael Caine's character tells Cooper that it looks like humanity is going to fail and that his daughter is going to be the last who survives. And of course he asks what is the solution, and Michael Caine's character, or otherwise known as the Professor, basically says what you need to do is you need to go into a spaceship and go through a wormhole. And he's like, don't be silly, I've got kids and everything. And then he says, well, human life matters on it. And then he's like, yeah, go on then. And basically he tells his daughter, and it tears her apart because they're so well connected and they've got such a strong connection. And it's really good because they're so convincing, and you really do believe that Cooper really is a good father, and that Matthew McConaughey really does play the good dad, and that they really are close. So the girl that plays the young Murphy, which is Cooper's daughter, is actually Mackenzie Foy, and holy shit does she do a really good job at the acting. So as I said, they really do have a strong bond, and it's so convincing because they're just both really two good actors. And I really like that because while the start is slow, it's more about the character development, so I guess it is good that they did that. So yeah, Cooper decides to go up in a spaceship with other people and his team, and they need to go through the black hole to find a new place to colonize humanity. And it's really good because while the start is not very complex, it gets more and more complex as you go through the story, and I really like that because at the end it's really complex, but you can still sort of get your head around it and you can sort of still understand it. So I'm not going to go on to any more of the story because that is mainly what the story is about. It's more about him trying to go through space and trying to find this right appropriate place for the rest of humanity. And of course I don't really want to say any more because I don't want to give away any more spoilers. So firstly, one of the really good things about this film is the cinematography, and quite frankly it is excellent. Now, I've seen most of Christopher Nolan's films, and when I really think about it, the cinematography in all of those films that Christopher Nolan has done is really excellent. And if you know him very well, then you'll know that he's done cinematography for things like Inception and Batman, and both of those films have been either nominated for certain awards in the Oscars or been nominated for cinematography. Definitely Inception won it, and it should have because the cinematography was excellent. So of course, while Christopher Nolan was also partly responsible for the cinematography, the other person mainly responsible for the cinematography is a person I can't actually pronounce properly, but he's a person that has had some really serious experience in doing films, and he's done some other big films as well. And quite frankly, I think it's amazing because there's so many wide-angle shots, and also it's pretty much almost all filmed in IMAX. So I would highly recommend that you watch this film in IMAX because the majority of it is filmed in that format. What I also like is that there's a fair amount of action scenes, and of course he hasn't done what Michael Bay would usually do, is where he does shaky camera and hundreds of explosions. What he does is he does really nice steady shots, but they're really cinematic and they just look absolutely stunning. Because I was watching this IMAX, I really got the full angle of what the cinematography was like, and it really was absolutely excellent. And it was steady, and I'm really glad about that because it meant that you could fully understand what was going on in the scene, and it just looked like how a sci-fi film should meant to look. So that is just one of the really great things about Interstellar. Another really good thing is the actors, and I think it's actually got a really great cast. It's got Matthew McConaughey, who really is an excellent actor, and he does a really fantastic performance, and also he's really convincing, and when he works with Mackenzie Foy, it just really works, and the connection is just fantastic, and as I mentioned before, it's really convincing, and I'm so glad that they used those two actors because it really makes the film more appealing right at the start. Of course, we've also got really fantastic actors like Michael Caine, Matt Damon, Anna Hathaway, who are also all really brilliant actors, and I've seen all of their films and I really do like their characters in this film. So right at the start of the film, I couldn't really understand how the writing in this film was actually going to be that good, and it was confusing because I've seen all the writing from the previous films from Christopher Nolan and they've all been excellent. And quite frankly, I was actually proved wrong because as the film develops, the writing gets much better, and I think if you are watching this film, you must have faith in it, literally, because it gets better and better, and quite frankly, I think it starts from slow and then it gets better and it picks up the pace and it gets a lot more interesting throughout the film. So to sum it up, the writing in this film is actually really good as well, and of course because it is Christopher Nolan, he really does develop his films really well, and because of that, it's just really impressive, and also it's quite complex as well, but it's a really creative story. So before I really knew anything about this film, I knew one thing, and I knew that the music was composed by Hans Zimmer. So I got really excited because pretty much all of the films that has music composed by Hans Zimmer is just fantastic. And I think my personal favourite had to be Inception, where his music really was just incredible. And I think that actually is the same case with this film. I think Hans Zimmer has actually done a really fantastic job because he's had so much previous experience in composing music for some really fantastic films. And yeah, I knew it was going to be good. And I don't think it was the best that Zimmer has ever done, but it was still really good and it was really original. And quite frankly, there was actually some unexpected music in it. But the thing is, it actually worked really well. I'd probably say it actually worked brilliantly because while it was out of place, it actually works really well because it was unusual, but it was really interesting and I think it fitted it really well. I'm actually really glad that they chose Hans Zimmer to compose the music for Interstellar, mainly because it works really well with the screenplay and I think it really enhances the experience. Yet again, when you watch it in IMAX, the sound just is absolutely fantastic and the soundtrack in this just really works well with it, and I'm really glad because it really enhanced the experience, and to be honest, I think they nailed it. But one thing I sort of noticed is that there were some soundtracks that actually sounded quite a lot like Oblivion. I'm not sure if that was copying or not. I think it might just be a coincidence, but I definitely noticed that some of the music sounded quite a lot from other films as well. But it was still original and it was still fantastic. So with that $165 million budget, they've got to spend it on something, and one thing I'm really glad they nailed is the visual effects. And quite frankly, it's just amazing. Basically, the best bit I found is they go through this sequence where they go through this black hole, and holy shit, it is just incredible. So of course, because nobody has really experienced a black hole, developing the theories of black holes is incredibly complex, and because of that we don't really know what a black hole looks like. But I think the representation of a black hole from Interstellar is absolutely breathtaking. And what they do is they use the cinematography, so they make the ship that they're flying in look really, really small, and it just looks breathtaking. And quite frankly, I'd probably say that the sequence of them going through the black hole is actually the best sequence I've ever seen in any film ever. So one reason the visual effects in this film was actually really good is because they've got the same team from some really big films that have done the visual effects, and the team is Double Negative. And if you know them, you probably might not, but they've actually done visual effects for some incredibly big and popular films. They've done the visual effects for Man of Steel, Godzilla, Total Recall, Iron Man, Harry Potter, and 2012. Another really great thing about this film is actually the design. So while that is part of the visual effects and the special effects, it just looks fantastic, and things like the spaceship just look breathtaking, and they have actually got some original ships that they've made themselves, and it just looks really, really cool. And they've also got some great design in the robots as well, and it all just looks absolutely stunning. So while the music was actually really fantastic, the sound editing was also really great as well, and the reason I say this is because one of the very first sequences in the film is basically them using one of the ships to fly through one of the other planets that they've discovered, and it just looks amazing. And also, while it does look amazing, it sounds amazing, and there's a lot of vibration produced from the ship, and they actually produced that in the cinema as well. So the whole cinema is literally vibrating like mad, and it's just an amazing experience, and it really does feel like you're there, and it makes it much more enhanced. Yet again, it's another reason to watch this in IMAX. And there's so much money gone into this film that I think they've nailed almost every single aspect. And another really great thing is the concept, and it really is amazing because they're literally trying to save humanity, and the great thing is that it's got such a good concept, and it's also got a good story as well, and it's portrayed really, really well. I find this scenario in so many films where the concept is really good, but the story is bad, and it just looks bad. And a good example has to be Transcendence. But apart from that, there's other really good things about this world, and quite frankly, I'm not surprised because it's already grossed $132 million, and I'm not surprised because it's probably one of the best films I've actually ever seen. So while those are all the really fantastic things about Interstellar, there were some things that I didn't really like, and firstly, one of the things was the speed of the film. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I think the first hour of the film is just too slow, and it sort of lowers your expectations of the film. But to be honest, that could actually be a benefit because your feeling of the film actually goes down, but because the next sequence is so good, it sort of raises up straight away because it is really breathtaking. It goes from a slow sequence to a fast sequence, and it really dramatically increases your view of the film. What I'm really trying to say is that I think there's too many sequences that drag on a little bit, but to be honest, I don't really think this is a problem, because while it does drag on, I would much prefer it dragged on and had better character development rather than a shorter film with less character development. But overall, I would say that I don't really think it needs to be a 2.5 hour film, because there were just some sequences I don't really think that are too necessary. I guess you could say that were important, but I think they dragged on a little bit, and I think it was a little bit too exaggerated. Also, there aren't really that many flashbacks from the actual previous characters, and I think that was a bit of a problem because you don't really know the characters enough. Now, the thing is, there's much character development in this film, which means that you do get to know the characters, but I thought there could have been more character development, so I thought more flashbacks would have been helpful. But to be honest, the good thing about that is that it's not necessary, because the characters are just portrayed really well, and quite frankly, flashbacks weren't actually that necessary. Probably the biggest downside of this film is the fact that it's just too complex, and because of that it left too many unanswered questions. Now, you could say that is a benefit because it makes the concept a lot more interesting, and it sort of questions you, so it makes you think about the film much more after you've watched it. But to be honest, I just think that there are too many unanswered questions, and I think it made it a little bit too confusing, and I think there's going to be some people in the audience that think that's way too confusing, and I think it's going to let down the film. Probably a small disappointing thing in this film is the fact that it hasn't been filmed in 3D, and you can't actually watch this film in 3D. Now, while it is in IMAX, it's actually IMAX 2D. And you could say that's bad, because I think if this film was actually recorded in 3D, then it would have been breathtaking. Even more breathtaking, actually. But you could say that's good as well, because I usually find that some films actually film it in 3D, and because of that you have to film all the sequences in 3D. If they do one sequence that actually isn't filmed in 3D, then it makes the film look bad. So you could say that them not actually concentrating on the 3D is good, because they're concentrating on what actually matters. So those were actually only the downsides of Interstellar, and overall I would actually say that Interstellar is absolutely breathtaking, and I would give it a 9 out of 10. This truly is the best film I've seen this year, and it's actually one of the best films I've seen in quite a long time. Now, while I do love sci-fi films, this really is just a fantastic film, and almost every aspect of it is just done really fantastically. There's got great actors, great music, great concepts, great story, great cinematography, and editing, and almost every single aspect I think has been nailed. Honestly, in my opinion, I think Interstellar is actually a remarkable film, and I think it's actually an incredible achievement in cinema history. The reason I'm saying this is actually because it's got amazing screenplay, it's got fantastic, even incredible visual effects, and as I said, it's just got every aspect that I'd expect from a film just done brilliantly. And I think you would like it because while you may not like the genre, I just think all the actors and the concept would really amaze you, and I really think this is a must-see film. So that is my review of Interstellar. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, this is Angus, and today I'm going to give you a unboxing and review of the Beatron DC950 in-ear headphones. So, main actors that have both got Oscar-winning awards. Shit. So this film is of course played. Shit. I couldn't really understand how the writing in this film was going. Fuck's sake.